As John said, my name is Keith Palmgren, senior SANS instructor. Been around the cybersecurity industry actually since 1985, way before the term cybersecurity even existed, frankly. It's gone through a whole bunch of iterations. But yeah, I've been writing the 301 course since 2013, been teaching for SANS since 2011. But so this cover your assets by using the CIA, but correctly for a change. Now, what do I mean when I say, correctly for a change? That's going to become clear as I progress through this talk. But some of you, you're sitting here going, "Man, I've been doing cybersecurity for X number of years, and this is it, I already understand the CIA." Don't tune me out because I think what you're going to see here is a little bit different approach. The correctly for a change part of this is something you may not have seen before, unless, of course, you've taken my Sec 301 course. This is basically the expanded version of two of the slides from that particular course. Okay, but so let's go ahead and if my clicker will work. There we go. Let's go ahead and get in. What our agenda here for today is going to be a quick little review of what the CIA is all about for anybody who may have forgotten or is unaware. Introduce something I want to use, kind of an expedient called the pie chart. We'll see what I mean. Look at several examples from various companies and then see how it looks by sector, by department within companies, et cetera. And then hopefully, if we have enough time, we'll get into a little bit of Q&A there toward the end. But basically, the main to-do list we're going to learn. That's the whole idea here. And feel free to disagree. Not everybody is going to agree with everything I have to say here. That is perfectly okay. In fact, it's fully expected. But, agree or disagree, we can have a discussion about that. But if I make you stop and think about things, either things that you have never thought about before, that's good, or perhaps things that you have thought about before, but I make you think about them in a way, a new and different way than you've thought before, I think there's very real value in that. And like I say, at the end of the day, we can agree or we can disagree, but if we are thinking about these things, then that's a path forward. And I think that's very, very important. Okay. So that's what we're going to work on doing here on this lovely day. The quick review here, the CIA triad. Confidentiality, only those who need access to information should have access to that information. Integrity, making sure the integrity of the data is, the data is kept in a pristine and accurate fashion. And of course, availability. If the resource has to be available to us, if we can't get to it and use it, it's not doing us very much good. Okay. Those are the basic three tenets of CIA. And by the way, you'll see in some books, you'll see it AIC in different orders, and I don't care what order you put the three letters in. But the CISSP, the Security Plus, a lot of SANS courses, et cetera, they all refer to this as a triad. And if you go look up the definition of the word triad, in a dictionary, you're going to see it's going to say something like, implemented in three equal parts. And so we always tout this CIA triad as being something that we implement in three equal parts, and that's going to make our organizations completely secure, is pretty much the story that you're going to hear. In this talk, we are going to take this entire idea of this being a triad of three equal parts, and we're going to shatter that misconception. Okay. Because let's understand where this originally came from. The first instance that I can find anywhere in any book or anything else in the cybersecurity industry, the first occurrence of the term CIA triad that I can discover is on the CISSP exam. Now, understand the original questions for the CISSP exam were written by a man named Michael Corby. And he wrote those questions in 1988, 1989, and 1990. Mike Corby's CISSP certification number is number 1. He created the cert. And for full disclosure, Mike is an old boss of mine. He's a good friend of mine. And please understand, nothing I'm saying here is bashing on Mike or anything. He did an amazing job and created, at the time, an amazing certification. But I've talked about this, I've had this conversation with Mike Corby across a separate table. We talked it out. He basically will tell you, I wrote those CISSP questions, those original questions, for perfect world security. And oh, by the way, those questions have never been removed. Those 1988 questions that he wrote, they're still on the test. Okay. But what happened is this perfect world security that Mike wrote these questions about, they became essentially, conventional wisdom. Okay. And the problem is conventional wisdom is not always wise. And in fact, in my experience, and I've been around long enough to have quite a bit of it, quite often, almost always, conventional wisdom is not wise. Okay. It becomes too cookie cutter. So let's look at this from a different perspective. There's a place, I call this Keith's perfect world. And in Keith's perfect world, everybody gets 800% of their staffing request, 900% of their budget request. It's a very, very lonely place. In fact, nobody actually lives in Keith's perfect world. We all live in the real world, or we get, 50% of our staffing or 20% of our budget or whatever. And back in the 90s, late 90s, I managed what at that time was the second largest security consulting program in the world. And I was with Sprint back when Sprint was still a Fortune 50 company. But in many organizations, we would go into company after company after company, and we would try to implement the CYA as three equal parts, the triad, the way we had been taught, the way we had been certified, etc. And in every case, we failed. And why we failed is because of this right here. Companies did not have the staffing, they did not have the budget, they could not implement the CYA in three equal parts. And finally, after being beat over the head with this enough times, eventually even I will get it. We had to start looking at this from a different perspective. And that's what we're talking about here. Now, for getting this, I'm going to use this little pie chart here, okay? And I'm going to bend and move this around and so on. And the blue area is going to be for availability, and the red area is going to be for confidentiality, and the green area is going to be for integrity, and so on, okay? And I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to change the size of these slices of the pie as we move along. But the specific percentages, that's not the point here. Okay. We could discuss, oh, this ought to be, 96%. No, it ought to be 95% or whatever. That's not the point. I'm just giving some generalities here. And again, some are not going to agree with my weighting on some of these, and that's okay. We can have a discussion about that. But this is just, like I say, kind of an expedient I'm going to use to try to make a point with several different companies. And there's nothing special about these companies as far as I've never worked with these companies. I've never had any business relationship with them. I don't have any insider knowledge about these companies or whatever. These are just simply, I picked some of the largest companies in each of the sectors I wanted to touch on. Okay. And that's where these are coming from. But so like I say, no insider knowledge here. This is if one of these companies hired me as their new CISO, day one, walking in the door, I would have certain assumptions in my head. That's what you're about to see here. These are my day one assumptions, again, with no insider information. Okay. So Coca-Cola, I think most of us are familiar with the company. They make soft drinks as well as other stuff, but I'm going to kind of focus here on the soft drinks here. And so the formula for Coca-Cola, if you aren't aware, is notoriously well protected. There's all kinds of folklore. It's supposedly only known by three executives, one third of it by each of three executives, and they're kept in different safes and et cetera. Okay. Because there are other companies in the world that, if they had the exact formula, could recreate Coca-Cola. And so protecting that formula is vitally important. Also, any research that they're doing on new Cokes or sodas or whatever it happens to be, new products, all of this is very important. And so when they prioritize these three elements, confidentiality, protecting all those formulas, that is going to be their number one concern. Integrity also becomes kind of important. They learned years ago with new Coke, Coke needs to taste like Coke, or the customers don't like it. And so integrity of the formulas needs to be maintained. Availability, they care. I mean, obviously, they don't want to lose the formula for Coke, obviously, but that would be a distant third as far as their prioritization of these three elements. Okay. If we move on to a different type of an organization, not a lot of folks are familiar with the company Ball, but they're actually a large multinational company. And go into the grocery store and walk down the aisle, and if you see a bottle or a can, it is almost certainly made by this company. Okay, they make like over 95% of all of the bottles and cans for products all over the world, and sodas, vegetable soup cans, whatever, aerosol cans. jelly jars and Coke bottles and everything else. If there's a bottle or a can in the grocery store, it probably came from Ball. Okay, I remember when I was a kid, these are, my grandma used these to can her vegetables every summer. Those were also Ball jars, but they're actually a much bigger organization than that. And so when we start looking at the C, the I, and the A with a company like Ball, how you make a bottle or a can is not, it's a pretty well-known thing. Okay, so confidentiality of how they do some of that is not that big a deal. Okay, they probably don't want their competitors to know some of their processing, some of their manufacturing techniques and things, but it's how you make a bottle or how you make a can is not that big of a secret. Integrity matters, QA, it's got to be a pretty top issue, but availability. I mean, just think every soda bottle and soda can by Coke and Pepsi are, every one of those bottles and cans are made by Ball. Just think, count that number of items that they have to manufacture all over the globe. And they actually have a whole bunch of manufacturing facilities, again, around the globe and throughout the US, various locations as well as overseas. And so their availability, making sure that they've signed a contract with a company like Coke or a company like Pepsi, and making sure that they're able to deliver on that, that's an availability issue. Availability is going to be by far their biggest concern. Now, I did have a gentleman approach to me one time when I gave this presentation from the company Ball. And he said, we actually also have an arm that does research and development on, how to make better cans and better bottles. And I'll come back to that because it's a really valid point. But I need to show you a few other things before we have that conversation. So give me a few minutes. Okay. Now, take a company. I'm using Chase Manhattan Bank here. They're a large U.S. bank. I could pick any bank, any big, Bank of America, whatever one, Capital One. It doesn't matter which one I choose here. I just picked a bank, okay? And for right now, I am speaking very specifically about their online banking business line, okay? If you can't get to your online bank for a little while, it's inconvenient. It's not the end of the world. They don't want it to happen, obviously, but it's not the end of the world. If I can see your bank account balance, okay, that's bad. But when I can change your bank account balance inappropriately, that's a big issue. And that's an integrity issue. And therefore, for online banking, integrity is the number one concern. Confidentiality takes a significant chunk of the pie too. Availability, it's kind of an also ran. It is there, but it's not their biggest concern by any measure. Okay. But let's do understand how your online bank protects that integrity. Hopefully, in order for you to log into your online bank, you have to enter, good, strong authentication, preferably two-factor or multi-factor authentication, passphrases, the whole bit. And normally, strong authentication measures of that nature are considered a confidentiality measure. I keep you out of my network, off of my system, so that you can't see my stuff. And that is a valid reason for doing authentication. It absolutely is. But in this particular case, authenticating you is a secondary, the confidentiality part is a secondary concern. Their number one reason for implementing that strong authentication on your bank account is so that I can't log into your account and transfer your money from your account to mine. That's an integrity issue because I have inappropriately changed the balance of your account. Makes sense. Okay. So now again, change this up. I'm talking very specifically here about the online banking part of Chase. But if you start looking at like online trading and stock market stuff, there's all kinds of laws, and this pie chart would have to change because they would have to have availability take a much bigger part of that. But this again is let me try it again. This right here is very specifically for the online banking part of that particular company. Okay. And then Pfizer. And again, I could have picked other pharmaceutical companies, but pharmaceutical formulas are vastly valuable. And just one example here, Lipitor, patent generated $172 billion from 1997 to 2022. That's more revenue than like 95% of the companies on the S&P 500 generated during the same period of time. a vastly valuable formula there. And protecting the formula is absolutely vital, especially while it's still in R&D and cannot be fully patented yet. I have been in some of the most secure facilities in the world at the National Security Agency, the various other government agencies and so on, military bases, been there, done that. And I've also been in the R&D facilities from some pharmaceuticals. And I will tell you that the security at the pharmaceutical R&D facilities was much greater than anything I have ever seen in a government facility. In one case, it was three-person integrity. You could not go anywhere in the facility without two other people with you, including to the restroom. All their restrooms are co-ed for that very reason. But so clearly, in this case, confidentiality, protecting those formulas, particularly in R&D, these are it's vitally important. Integrity is also pretty important here too. I mean, keeping the pills doing what they're supposed to do, or the shots, or whatever they happen to be, keeping the medicine doing what it's supposed to do, and so it doesn't get tampered with or whatever. Integrity is pretty important. Availability of the formulas, though, fairly distant third. Pardon me. A fairly distant third. And just as a footnote, when I first put this slide together, Lipitor was the most valuable formula. It's been surpassed by AbbVie's Humira, which 219 billion from '03 to 2022. So, but again, like I said, the name of the company up here isn't what matters so much. It's the issues of protecting their R&D, and this pie chart here. If I change this slide from Pfizer to AbbVie, I would not change the pie chart at all. Okay, that's not the issue. The name of the company, it's the kind of concerns that a company of this nature would have. That's what matters here. Okay. Now, Exxon, big oil company. What's their biggest concern? Keep the oil flowing. And they also, I mean, how valuable is, all of their research on where the oil deposits in the Gulf of Mexico or wherever else in the world, these are valuable secrets that they have. So confidentiality, protecting the oil deposit data and keeping the oil flowing, you're going to see the confidentiality and availability almost share the pie. Integrity, a lesser concern, but again, like where is the oil deposit stored? They don't want that data tampered with. So yes, integrity does still have some play here. Okay. Now, how about Amazon? Amazon 2023 revenue, $574 billion. That's a little over $1 million a minute. And yes, on an Amazon day like today, it's a little higher than that, but average it out across the entire year, about a little over $1 million a minute. And what's their number one concern? When you open a browser and you type Amazon.com, they want you to see Amazon.com in your browser and buy your products, whatever they are. Okay. They also, confidentiality would be important because they don't want me to access your credit card info, and integrity. If the book is supposed to cost $1, they want it to sell for $1, not 10 cents or whatever. So those are also considerations. But Amazon online shopping, their number one concern is that when you open a browser and type Amazon.com, you get to their website, and they want that website to remain available at all times. Okay. And so therefore their pie chart would look something like that. All right. So, so far, so good. I think it's fairly clear, I hope. But up to this point, everything's reasonably accurate, pretty easy, but it's also greatly simplified. Okay. So let's go back and we just looked at the Amazon example. Let's take a second look at it. Nothing here changed. This is a repeated slide. But notice that this is in general. Okay. And this particular pie chart is very specifically looking at their online sales. Okay. But Amazon, that's not their only business line. They are also the largest cloud provider in the world. And if you look at their cloud pie chart, if you will, availability, I mean, their cloud customers have to be able to access their systems and so on, and confidentiality of the protecting the confidentiality of the customer data, that's also going to be important. Integrity. Actually, if you look at the contract with Amazon Web Services, the integrity piece lies mostly with the customer. Amazon has to make sure the tools are available, but doing the integrity protections is primarily on the customer. So I would fashion the pie chart for their cloud service somewhat like that. And then there's another part. What about where they develop things like the Echo and the Kindle and products of this nature? Their R&D. That's going to have a very, very different pie chart. Okay. And again, change the name of the company out here, but things like R&D, you're going to see a pie chart looking like something like that in pretty much all of them. And then it's not just by sector, but inside of each company, you're going to see different prioritizations for availability, confidentiality, integrity in the payroll department, in the accounting department, in the human resource department, and so on. And again, I'm using Amazon here as a simple example, but this particular chart or set of pie charts, this would apply to, insert company name here. You're going to see something akin to that for pretty much any company you happen to walk into, whether whoever it is. Okay. So as you're going through and you're trying to do your prioritizations, you not only do it based on what sector you're in, and keep in mind, some large companies like Amazon have multiple sectors, as I said, but then within that, by department, different prioritizations would also be appropriate. Okay. And now, one of the things about this entire presentation, my original plan, when I first dreamt this thing up, I was going to come up with at least one example where one of the three didn't apply, either the C, the I, the A, one of the three. In this particular example, it doesn't matter. And I spent longer on that than I did on the entire rest of the presentation combined. In fact, over twice as long. And I literally cannot come up with that example. And I finally, like I say, I beat myself over the head long enough. Sooner or later, it makes sense. Uh, any good pie requires all the ingredients. You may put the ingredients in different proportions in different types of pies, but any good pie requires all the ingredients. So every example that I could come up with, uh, at least a little bit of the pie belongs to each of the three. And in some cases, as you just saw, a lot more. And I've had a few folks approach me on this and go, well, what about this example? And okay, let's talk that one through. And we walk through it and go, well, but right here, though, okay, the integrity piece there it is. It's right there. It matters. And so any example I come up with, eventually I found a place for all three of them. Some of them are very obvious, obviously, but some of them not so much. Okay. So summary. Stop focusing on the CYA as a triad. It's a mistake. It is an unattainable ideal. Okay. Very few, if any, companies have the resources necessary to accomplish that triad. Instead, start focusing on CYA as a method of prioritization. You have limited resources. Prioritization is absolutely vital. Okay. And with that, John, I have not been keeping an eye on the questions. Have there been any questions?
There are a couple questions. However, it would probably be easier for you to type the answers because they're fairly in depth. So I didn't want
All right.
to take the time to read them all out live to you and then have you try to remember everything I said.
All right. That'd be fine.
So I'll let you
I'll,
dive into the
I'll,
Q&A on that.
yep, I'll be happy to do that. And by the way, folks, that email address you see there, keith@netip.com, I've had that address since 1997. If you're going to send me an email, please feel free to, and I'll answer questions that way as well. But do me a favor. I get about 1,000 spams a day on that email address. So put the word student in the subject line, and that will keep you out of my spam filter. And it also puts a flag on my email, so I make sure and take a look.